Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. As usual, we will just wait for the room to fill up before we get going. You're all very welcome. Please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from. We'll be getting going in a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone who's just joined us. You're very welcome to today's webinar. I'm just waiting for the Zoom space to fill up a little bit more, and then we'll be getting going with the webinar properly. I want to see the numbers stabilize a bit before we start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We've still got people joining the Zoom room, but I will get going with some of the housekeeping. So welcome to today's webinar on pay. I'm joined by Tazy from the LRD, and I'll introduce her properly in just a second, but just a little bit of our usual housekeeping. We do have captions on today's webinar. If you click the button at the bottom of the video that says show captions, you'll be able to see those coming up live underneath the video. We would like to take some questions from you for Tazy after she's told us about updates on pay. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the Q&A panel. Again, that's at the bottom of the screen. It looks like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. It's lovely to see so many of you already saying hi in the chat panel and saying where you're from. We here at the TUC, we love to hear what's going on in workplaces and maybe any tips or best practice advice that you can share with us and of course with each other, because we always learn lots about what's going on in workplaces and helping people to be good union reps through sharing ideas. And we are, of course, recording today's webinar. So if you miss anything or you need to drop out, we will be able to share that with you later today or tomorrow, along with any resources that we share with you in the chat. So don't worry if you miss any of those links now. We'll make sure they get passed on. So as I said, we are joined by Tazy from the Labour Research Department. Now, I hope that a lot of you have already used some of the Labour Research Department's resources. They have a fantastic website which is full of information that will help you in your role as a rep. You can take a look at the website. There are publications and reports available to buy or subscribe to, and you can get your union branch to subscribe, so you have access to all of these available resources, and you can apply for discounts and things as well through your branch. So we'll be posting more links to those a bit later. So first of all, I'd like, Tazy, can you just tell us a little bit about your role at the LRD before we get on to the questions about pay specifically?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm a researcher and writer at the LRD. I contribute to our publications, including Workplace Reports, which the screen is blurring out, unfortunately, and to research projects that we do on commission for trade unions. So yeah, I do sort of pay research mostly. Yeah.
Thanks. So I've written a bunch of questions for Tazy about pay, about some of the information we've got about pay over the past year and how we can use this information crucially going forward in our roles as workplace reps. So first of all, please, can you tell us what changes in pay we've seen over the past year from the summer 2023 through to the summer 2024? What can we learn from that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the headline story for this pay round is actually that we have seen some decent pay recovery this year in contrast to the previous years. So at the LRD, we have a pay deals database called Payline that is something that trade unionists across the country contribute to. And when we look at the data that we've gathered for the 2023-24 pay round, we see that the median pay deal for the lowest paid workers in each bargaining unit was coming in at 5.5% and 5% for all grades. So that's a really solid increase, right? And so just to explain what that figure is, that's a median figure. So if we put all the pay deals in a line, it would be if we took the middle one, how much is that group getting? And so that's how we get the 5.5% figure. So half of deals are above that and half are below. And if we compare that to the year before, the 2022-23 pay round saw the lowest paid workers get a median deal of 7.2% and 6.5% for all workers. So this year's figure is a bit lower, but it's still good news. But obviously we need to think about that in relation to inflation, which I'm going to talk about more later. But just to sort of initially do that, pay deals have been coming in above the monthly inflation statistic consistently since October of 2023. So if we look back to last year when we were seeing higher headline deals, still every month in that year's every month in that pay round, pay deals were losing ground on inflation. And overall in the previous pay round, right, there was a deficit of 2.5%. So this year has actually turned the tide on that trend. But if we look at the most recent months, in October, for instance, the latest month that we have data for, we're seeing pay deals losing that advantage over inflation. So deals are now averaging 4.0%, while inflation has ticked up again to 3.4%. So there's sort of a closing of the gap between the two. And looking ahead, the OBR is forecasting that RPI will be 3.5% in 2025, and CPI is expected to stay around the 2% target rate. So that's the rate that pay deals will need to keep beating if we want to continue this sort of period of recovery. Another interesting feature of the deals that we're seeing is that there's a narrower range than previously. So the top 13% of deals were getting 10% or higher. So we are seeing some really, really big wins still. And a quarter of deals won over 7%. So those are some really strong results. But generally, there's been like quite a sort of convergence of deals. Whereas in previous years, we saw more at the high and low ends. And another element of that is that we're seeing sort of pay compression at the bottom. So lower paid workers have been getting some really significant increases, partly driven by minimum wage increases, because the minimum wage went up by about 10% last year. And so, so if we look at sort of some work at the sectors with low paid workers, for instance, in the supermarkets, there's been some really big increases. And some other sort of features of the deals that are still coming through is there's a lot of deals with multiple stages. So they might cover multiple years, or they might postpone part of the pay rise to sort of in 6 months' time. And we're still seeing these lump sum cost of living payments, or they're not always called that, but sort of unconsolidated increases. But that is sort of tapering off. So 13% of the deals that we looked at still had an increase like that. Of course, the danger with those payments is that if you don't match that the next year, then you've got a drop off compared to the pay deal that included the lump sum. And also a lot of deals, as ever, have really good improvements to sick pay, family leave, and we're seeing new kinds of family leave coming through as well, and improvements to annual leave and so on as well.
Thanks, Tazy, for that really helpful introduction. And lots of the elements that you touched on there we'll be coming back to get a bit more detail on, or clarify some of the definitions and things like that. So as you mentioned, the LRD has something called Payline, which is where you get all this information from that helps you monitor this and analyze this. So all of you who aren't sure whether your pay information gets sent to Payline, we'll share details about how you can get involved with that, because the more information the Labour Research Department have got, the better their research and their analysis can be. Information is power, right? So we'll share information about how you can contribute to that. And when we do a webinar on this subject next year, we'll be including information from you. Okay, so we've got reps from any of our unions on this webinar, which means that they can work in any job, in any sector across the economy. Can we see any patterns within different sectors? So for example, in health, education, private sector, transport, what are the differences and where are things maybe matched?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, there's actually the big story is kind of that there's this real sort of feeling of convergence in the pay deals we've seen in the last year. So most sectors saw a median pay deal of 4 or 5%, basically. So that applies to manufacturing, business support services like cleaning and security, for instance, finance, energy, oil and water, waste, IT and comms, arts and entertainment. They were all getting that 4 or 5%. The public sector actually had higher deals on average than the private sector in the pay round. So in the 3 months to September, the median public sector deal was 5%, whereas it was 4% in the private sector. And we know teachers and nurses got the 5.5% deals quite recently. So council and school staff in England and Wales on the NJC pay scale, they accepted a 1,925 increase across all grades. But then some workers, especially refuse workers, took action locally to actually win higher deals than that. And if we look at the medians for each sector, the sector that had the highest median was actually retail, but that's because they're starting at quite a low base level. Transport was a sector that also did especially well, and the median there was 5.5%, and a quarter of their deals got over 7%, and 1 in 5 of the deals included improvements in shift premiums, lump sum payments, or pensions, and we also see that kind of thing happening, especially in manufacturing. And there were also some real sort of star deals in transport. So, for instance, on the buses, Stagecoach, Go Ahead, and First Bus depots got over 10%. We saw EasyJet cabin crew get a 13.5% deal. So yeah, some really impressive deals in transport. Manufacturing, if we sort of delve into that, they had a 5% median pay deal, and with some really strong headline deals, like CF Fertilizers with 21.2% for their lowest paid workers. And in food and drink, we only saw 4 deals that didn't beat inflation. Energy, oil and water, also a median of 5%, and no deals below 4%, which is really good. And some deals that were specifically linked to inflation. So like the agreement says that, you know, it's there to match inflation. And construction and housing workers, they also had a strong median with 5.8%. And that's a sector where there's a lot of arrangements that cover large numbers of workers. So, for instance, workers covered by the National Agreement for the Engineering and Construction Industry, they got 11.3%, and that was after taking action as well. And just to say, the LRD we've published a big report about the 2022-2023 pay round, that goes into it sector by sector and industry by industry, which we are offering everyone here for free as a download. So I'm sure Shanaz can share the details in the chat now, but it will also go around in an email afterwards. And so that is a resource that you can go and look at your very specific industry, find out about some headline deals, about the medians. So I do recommend checking that out, definitely. And just to talk about like why it might be sort of significant that we're seeing this kind of convergence in deals, and why parity sort of matters in that sense, is that we do want to be sort of bargaining in a way that is creating as a reality the sense that there is a rate for the job, right? Like that we're not allowing undercutting in our industries, or between industries, because ultimately, to an extent, we're all part of the same labor market, right? And so if there is low pay happening in one part of the economy, employers are seeing that, they're seeing that pulls, like, it's a downward pressure on pay. And so we need to be having that kind of economy-wide, sector-wide coordination that can bring up pay sustainably. So I think that's one thing that is probably worth discussing, given that we are seeing a lot of like quite similar deals coming out right now.
Thanks for that. And I think it's important for us to I'll just repeat why we're sharing this with you all, because we want to get across in this webinar that information about what's going on across your sector, be in the raw pay deal that is agreed, or in other aspects of pay that might enter negotiations. It's all helpful information, whether you're involved in putting together a pay claim, or if you're communicating with your members about the pay claim. All of this is helpful. I've just seen the link from my colleague Tanya and from Shanaz about how you can get hold of this report. So do take a look at that after we finish today. Okay, my next question for you is about the context that this sits in. Because you referenced a bit earlier that we've got all these numbers about percentage increases, and that's great, but we need to know the situation that it sits within. What can you tell me about that, please?
Yeah, so I think the thing that's developed about the situation is obviously previously we were at the height of the cost of living crisis, right? And so just beating inflation was a real challenge that a lot of unions did manage to really rise to. So when we talk about what is a pay deal, what is it worth in real terms, we're meaning like after we take into account that we're worse off because of price increases, then actually how much more is this pay deal worth, or rather often how much less is my current pay packet worth, right? So yeah, but that was a really big challenge just to match inflation. But what's happened this year is that we've seen RPI, the measure of inflation that we want to use, right, has been falling over the course of the pay round. So it was 9.1% back in August of 2023, and it's gone down to 3.6% in July 2024 over the course of that pay round. So that's why we've seen that pay deals are now actually beating inflation since October 2023. And just the latest figures, CPI is 2.3% now, so just above the 2% target rate that the Bank of England aims for. And RPI is 3.4%. So this is still, meaning that we have to be on our guard each year, right? But it's come down from these extreme heights. And I think also another really crucial thing to point out about inflation, obviously, is there can be like a temptation, or at least the management would probably like us to just look at inflation for the last 12 months, right? What's the current inflation figure? How much a price has gone up in the last 12 months? But prices, obviously, these increases, they build year on year. So I think we need to be refusing to just look at the last 12 months. Basically, we know that inflation adds up year after year. That's how we experience it. That's the fact of the matter. And so if we look back to sort of 2022, RPI at one point was 14.2%. So those increases haven't gone away. They've sort of baked into prices, right? But they fall out of the 12-month figure. So prices today are actually 28% higher than they were in July 2021. And so, I think for most of us, our wages are not 28% higher, right? So that's the gap that we're trying to meet. So the pay recovery we've seen is really good news, but it's for most people still like a way to go for that. And another, I think, part of the context is that because of the high inflation, the Bank of England has been keeping interest rates really high. And they are starting to bring them down now, but so they were 5.25% for a long time. They're now 4.75%. But this has one very direct effect on workers, which is that for many of us, it makes our housing costs more expensive. If you have a variable mortgage rate, then it's likely that it's going to go up when interest rates are high. And also for people who are getting a mortgage is going to be more expensive than people who are renting. Sometimes that's going to be passed on to renters, right? So it increases housing costs, but also more generally, it's a way of putting the brakes on the economy in order to try to stop prices from there being pressure on prices, right? So that's it's a quite deliberate squeeze, both on our employers and on us. So that's really also forming part of the sort of economic context.
Thanks for that helpful explanation so that we can understand these figures in the situation they come in. I've got just a little bit of an extra question that isn't one of the ones we prepared, but you will know the answer. So a viewer has asked, just for a bit of clarification about where the data that you're talking about comes from, because it's all very interesting, but they imagine that some industries and employers might not be comfortable releasing it. So how does Payline work, which is where I assume you get all this data from?
So Payline is it's a resource for the trade union movement, and it's sort of fueled by information that trade unionists give us, right? So people tell us once they've agreed a pay deal, they tell us about their pay deal, they tell us the structure of it, they tell us and also we're really trying to build up our data about pay rates as well as pay deals. So HR companies, they also have employers reporting pay deals to them, but Payline is quite unique because it's about negotiated deals, right? So that's really a really important resource for the movement, I think, to be able to have something like that that's cross-industry, cross-union. But also a lot of the data I'm talking about also comes from the ONS, so the Office for National Statistics. So they also publish pay data based on sort of surveys, and they publish data about inflation, especially. So, and that is an open resource, and most of the most important the important data series that they run, they also each month they publish it with like a bulletin that explains it. So, and many unions also do that work, and we also cover every month. The opening page of Workplace Report gives you an overview of sort of pay and prices data, including the sources. So definitely, yeah, if you just open the opening pages of Workplace Report, you can find that all kind of rounded up each month.
Thanks for that extra info. I think it's really helpful to put it in them, like, how do we know all this? Okay, so as workplace reps who might be involved in helping with a pay claim or putting a pay claim together, what are the pressures on pay that they should be looking out for?
Sure. So I think the main thing, right, the pressure sort of, I guess the pressure on us, the pressure from below is the pressure of the cost of living crisis still, right? Like that kind of cumulative impact of inflation. And there was an interesting report that ACAS published recently that showed actually that that the gap between what unions are putting in pay claims versus where employers are sort of starting with their opening offer is the gap has widened because of the cost of living crisis. So I think that's kind of the pressure we have to bear in mind. And also in terms of how we apply that pressure, I think the fact that there's been, sort of more confidence and people are building up experience with things like balloting and industrial action, that, we can be the pressure on pay, right? But I want to also think a bit about policies that are coming up that are going to be changing the picture. And most of this is probably going to be mostly important for lower paid workers. But basically the things that are on the horizon are the new minimum wage rates, the changes to national insurance, and also the new legislation, including the Employment Rights Bill. So I'll just try to sort of zip through each of those. So there were recently new minimum wage rates announced that will be implemented from April. So the new rate for those over 21 is going to be £12.21 an hour, which is a 6.7% increase. And the government had instructed the Low Pay Commission to start considering the cost of living and how it calculates its rates. And also the rate for 18 to 20-year-olds is being brought sort of steadily in line with the rate for over 21s. So that's going to be £10 from April, which is a 16% increase, which is great. But one thing that we see because of that, right, is like as the sort of minimum rises, it means that people are going to risk bunching up at the minimum. And so what we don't want to see, right, is we don't want to see negotiated rates getting sort of swallowed up by legal minimums. So I think we need to think about what's the premium that you've currently got over the minimum, and making sure that you sort of preserve that premium as the minimum goes up, and we don't let agreed rates get sort of swallowed up, as it were. And relatedly, there's also the sort of, this isn't a legal thing, it's a sort of voluntary thing that some employers do, the real living wage, which is calculated independently by the Real Living Wage Foundation. Their new rate is going to be £12.60, which they've sort of announced, but employers have quite a while to implement it. And in London, it's going to be £13.85. And I wanted to just highlight that the gap between the minimum and the real living wage, the non-London rate, has gotten to, from May, it will be just 39p, which is just a 3% gap. So I think, again, this sort of really shows that like bargaining, that it needs to be a bargaining agenda addressing low pay, right? Because these minimums are like still fundamentally like quite low. And I think something that a lot of employers are going to be bringing up as a reason that they're going to struggle to increase pay this year is national insurance. So national insurance is a tax on earnings that's paid both by employees and employers. And in the latest budget, national insurance, the amount that employers contribute is going up. And they've done that by lowering the threshold and increasing the rates that it's charged at. And hospitality and retail bosses have already sort of come out and said that that they're very furious about this. I think one sort of important point here, right, is that this is intended to be a business tax, not a tax on workers. So it is employers that should be shouldering this sort of tax burden. And also worth mentioning that the government has also put a bit of a sort of a discount called the employment allowance. They've increased that. So many employers will also be getting more money off their national insurance bill. So there's a sort of slight counteracting thing which would matter more for small businesses. But this is likely to be something that's coming up. And so you will want to be sort of asking for evidence from your employer. If they bring that up, you want to be asking them to like evidence that claim. And on the employment rights bill, I'm conscious that we're maybe a bit behind time, but the employment rights bill is mostly not about pay. It's mostly about sort of standard rights, but there are elements that affect pay. So for instance, statutory sick pay is going to be paid from day one once this comes in, which isn't for a long time, by the way. It's still, because it's still at the early stages. And paternity leave will become a day one right rather than having like a service requirement attached to it. They're also implementing these fair pay agreements for social care and school support staff, which will involve sort of negotiations between employers, employee representatives, and ministers. So this isn't exactly collective bargaining, right? Because ministers are going to have quite a lot of control in this process. But the idea is to increase pay in those sectors. So that's positive. And there's also a separate bill, which is called the Equality, Race and Disability Bill, that is going to bring in a requirement for ethnicity and disability pay gaps to actually be reported on by employers in the same way that they currently do for gender pay gap reporting, which could obviously give us some really good fuel for pay claims. And also that it will extend equal pay rights. So we can see sort of the kinds of equal pay claims that, for instance, GMB has been doing at like retailers and councils. It will be possible to make equal pay claims like that on the basis of disability and ethnicity as well. So that could be really quite a big change.
Thanks for that really helpful rundown of what's coming up. And everyone in the audience, please don't worry. We've clocked this. We've got it on our agenda for information, training and resources from us at the TUC next year. Watch this space. It might be a webinar, it might be a training course, it might be some other resource, but we will absolutely make sure that the information you need from any legislation change is got out to you all as and when you need it. So far, Tazy, we've been talking a lot about all these different types of information and a lot of detail, but in the role of a workplace rep, either if they're a negotiator or if they're involved in helping negotiators before they get in the room, what information should they particularly be looking out for? And crucially, why is information powerful? Why is this important?
Yeah, I think information is definitely powerful and there's sort of two different kinds of information, two different reasons and two different audiences maybe we can think about. Because on the one hand, you want to make sure that your members are confident that they are making a claim that is sort of viable. You want members to really like believe in the claim that you're putting forward, and also you want to make the case to the management at the negotiating table about like why it's needed. And I think so those two things obviously are quite sort of closely related. And I would say there's sort of two different types of information. There's the information that's about the financial aspect of it. So grounding your pay claim in arguments about the cost of living, about what kinds of pay rates are there across your sector, where do you sit in the sort of income distribution for your sector. And so it's really helpful to have all of that kind of financial detail sort of quite concrete, right? But you also really want information about your members. What is your members' experience? Literally just like, what is the pay structure? How many people are on different grades? Where are they? Are they in the union yet, etc.? Because you want to go into negotiations knowing that you are representing your members' priorities, and that you've built up their collective confidence to be able to like put forward that claim. So I think those two things are sort of related, right? You need the members' confidence, and you need to bring that to the negotiating table. Members will be more confident if you can make the sort of financial argument more strongly to them as well.
Thanks, Tazy. And when it comes to sharing information, reps within a workplace or within a branch can obviously talk to each other, or we hope they do. We always encourage that. But what are some of the other ways that reps can share information, either geographically or sectorally or within the union?
So I think, sharing information with the members that you're representing is really, really important for the reasons we just sort of talked about. So A few sort of ideas for what that could look like would be organizing meetings and see if you can get, if you can like have a presentation about the issues and make, create a dialogue there. Running surveys as well is like a way to kind of like give people information and get information at the same time. And you sort of create that sense of dialogue and mapping your members as well as you go. I think print publications are really helpful because they're also sort of like a quite, like they're in the space and you can do it hand to hand and have that conversation at the same time. So most unions have, a magazine or journal that you can use, or you might be able to create resources specifically for your workplace as well. So for instance, you could try to do something like create an information sheet about what's happened to pay in your workplace, how is that affecting people, and get people handing that out and having those conversations.
Thanks, Tazy. I think there's some great ideas there about how some of this information can be communicated to members. Pay is, of course, important to all of us. It's sort of the backbone, really, of why we're working. But sometimes it can be difficult to explain because it's numerical. There could be lots of graphs involved. But at one point I want to add here is a lot of the data that might be available through the Office of National Statistics or combined with information about inflation. It's complicated. I think I'm not the only person who would say they sometimes find this confusing, but the Labour Research Department do a lot of this analysis for you. You can look at the information on their website and find some helpful explainers about perhaps how all this information links together that might help you when you're trying to explain this to your members during the course of talking to them about pay. Okay, so another source of information, and one that might be quite daunting at first, is company accounts. Now, we're not suggesting that reps go into every single line of accounts. It's far too much information. But what are some of the main headlines or important features that reps could be looking for as part of this work around pay?
Yeah, sure. So I think, just on that quickly about not expecting everyone to dive into Companies House, there are other places that you can look for information that your company has presented about their financial situation. And one thing to think about is, if your company's got shareholders or if your company wants to present a positive image to the public, they are likely to present perhaps a very different narrative to them than they will to you at the bargaining table. So it's worth kind of going to look, what is it that they're saying to shareholders? What are they saying in their press releases? Are they getting any big contracts through, to kind of just get those sort of a headline sense of how your company is doing. But yeah, Companies House is a brilliant resource. So companies have to file each year accounts. It's with a lag. So you're looking at information that's a bit out of date, something to be aware of if your company has been thrown into crisis in the last year, but otherwise still very useful. And I think the first thing you want to actually look at is, sorry, this is for people in the private sector primarily, but who owns the company? What is the parent company? And what are the other companies in the group, for instance? Or if it's publicly traded, who are the major shareholders? I think that kind of information can be really helpful for knowing, like, who am I actually bargaining with right now, and who is the real decision maker. But in terms of the actual finances there, right, the main thing you want to look at is profits. But there's different measures of profit, right? So operating profit is a sort of a better one to look at because that's got like fewer, there are things that can really like disrupt the profit figure if they sort of mess around with their assets or whatever. But the operating profit is going to be a useful figure to look at. It's also sometimes helpful to think about the profit margin rather than just the headline total profits. And also you don't want to just look at just 1 year because sometimes these figures are quite volatile. So you might want to have like a few years sort of view on it. And then there are some other things that are also really useful to check out, like how much have they paid out in dividends to the shareholders of the company? What salary are the directors on? And so that really shows you, that they probably do have money to spare. They're choosing who to give it to. And, your argument has to be that the workers should be at the front of the queue for that. Another thing you can look at is things like sales, are sales up or down, and also the cost of inputs. So for instance, like if they're if the cost of other inputs is declining, or if other costs are a smaller proportion of the sales, then basically that sort of like means that there's money that can be put aside for pay, right? So you can, and often you can reach out to the LRD or to your union for help with that work often, and sometimes you can find workshops about these things as well. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that. Some really useful things to look out for if someone has access to that information. Obviously, as we said, will apply to the private sector. And my last question in this section is about pay claims. So I appreciate that not everyone in the audience will actually put the final pay claim together, but even if you don't, you may well be involved in providing information to the people who do put the pay claim together. For example, you might be part of a national bargaining structure, especially in the public sector, where this is negotiated sort of separately from your workplace, but there's still information that reps can help share and get involved in. But Tacy, please talk us through the main sections of a pay claim and what sort of things could be included.
Sure. So I think the point of a pay claim, right, is you want to be making the case for the things that you're trying to win, and you want to keep your focus on those priorities, right? And I've presented quite a lot of information already, but it's not about packing your pay claim full of statistics sort of for the sake of it. It's not an essay, it's a pay claim, and so the statistics that you use, they're there to serve the argument, right? So that also means that there's not one right answer about what information should always be in a pay claim, because it sort of depends on you have to read the situation and work out what is going to be the most relevant. So for instance, if there are a lot of vacancies in your industry, you want to be really like drawing out that as a reason for pay rises, right? If the problem is that your members are really struggling, then maybe you need to be sort of foregrounding that argument. But I think basically the kind of way we can think about it is why you're asking for that increase. Like what are the kind of comparison points in the sector, or the reasons coming from your members that you're putting forward the claim that you've arrived at. Perhaps there are equalities issues with the current pay structure. If so, you want to be explaining those. And then in addition to pay, obviously we don't want it to be just about pay. What are the other elements of the claim? And if you actually do have if your understanding is that your employer is would struggle to fund a proper pay rise, then maybe looking at other elements of the claim can be a way around that. So for instance, could you instead reduce working time, or are there improvements to maternity and paternity leave that would mean a lot to members but would have a lower bill for the employer? But obviously we don't want to duck the question of the headline pay rise as well. You want your pay claim to include a costing. So you want to be going into it knowing roughly what you're asking for, roughly how much does it cost, because then that's going to mean that you're actually in a position to negotiate about that headline figure. And that's going to mean you'll need information about what's the current pay bill, what's the number of workers, what's their grade, etc. And then the other section of the argument is why you believe that claim is viable for the employer to pay. So we talk about this concept of ability to pay, which is if we look at the employer's turnover, the profits, the cost structure, and so on, or what contracts they're bringing in, then what are they actually able to afford? And you want to be able to argue that this pay rise is doable. And that might mean, again, you don't want to shy away from the idea that there might be trade-offs. Like it might mean, we think you're not going to be able to do this thing because we think you need to prioritize this pay rise. That's a legitimate thing to put in a pay claim, right? And all of these arguments can be made using comparisons. For instance, in your wider industry, which is where the Payline data and the ONS data that we present can be really, really helpful. But you might also want to make an argument for why maybe the pay rise does make sense for the employer. So for instance, if there's a bad morale issue, or if there's a retention issue, then it really might make sense for them to offer a higher pay rate, because then that's going to have benefits for them, right? If they've got a more motivated workforce, then they're not having trouble filling vacancies and so on. So that really can be something that that maybe the interests come together. So those are kind of the different ways you can sort of structure it. But I think, staying really focused on the priorities of the claim and being clear about those, including figures that support those specific things you want to prioritize.
Thanks, Tazy. Before I move on to questions that we've had submitted from the viewers, I'll just let you catch your breath a minute and just remind the audience that if you've joined us here live today, we at the TUC will send you via email a digital credential showing that you have attended today and what you've learned as part of this webinar. So do keep a lookout for that. It will come to you tomorrow morning via email, and you'll be able to then share that with your employer, with your members, or with your union to show what you've learned today about pay, and it's evidence that you did join us. Okay, I'm going to take a look now at the questions we've had submitted. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And any we don't manage to get to, we will use that to inform future resources that we put out about pay and pay negotiations. So first off, you referenced, Tazy, that sometimes there might be other things you could put into a pay deal. It doesn't always have to be purely about the money. So have you got any examples of deals that you know about at the LRD where people got other things in their pay deal and they might have maybe taken a smaller monetary rise to compensate for that?
Sure. I mean, yeah, to sort of open with a kind of a more general answer, I think like, yeah, so the other elements we might be talking about, might be sort of changing hours to enable a 4-day week, which we just saw on railways, which is really interesting. Or it might be improvements to specific types of leave, like bereavement leave or maternity leave being a really, really crucial one, right? And sick pay. And within all those cases, right, you want to be able to like know what it's costing the employer. So like, how is it reasonable to like trade that off against the headline pay increase? But often those things are actually going to make a really big difference to people's quality of life, because, you know, if you're struggling to get by on really low sick pay, that can set you back so badly. And so I think that, yeah, it can be like really important for individuals, basically. And I'm trying to think of a good example of one where there was a trade-off. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say I'm not sure of a specific one where they did that trade-off of other elements
Not to
for
worry.
pay. But there was this recent deal on the railways where they've negotiated a 4-day week, but with only a quite small change to hours, right? And they did that by like changing they sort of turned their lunch breaks into paid lunch breaks, and then sort of moved them to and lengthen the day slightly in order to get a 4-day week, which is a very interesting development.
And these are all ideas that we could perhaps be inspired by, borrow bits of, tweak, that everything is sort of there as inspiration. Okay, we've had quite a few questions and points raised in the chat about different geographical areas of the country. Have you got any information about how maybe that is the case? You know, have the LRD noticed any trends based on geography? Because we are told that cost of living does vary by region. What can we do about that? Have you noticed anything about that?
To my knowledge, we've prioritized sector-based analysis, and a lot of the employers we look at, right, they're employers that are nationwide employers, so the deal is nationwide. But they're definitely, yeah, I mean, there are like pay discrepancies based on region. I think that the ONS might really be a better place to look for that kind of data, because like I said, the deals we get, they're not necessarily going to be tied to a certain geography, because they might be nationwide, whereas ONS does data. They base their data on an individual's salary rather than on pay deals. So they're kind of more able to then, like, that sort of generalizes more easily to looking at geographical information. But I'll make a note to try to include something in the follow-up email that goes into sort of geography.
Yeah,
but I think from a bargaining point of view, right, like, I think, you know, sometimes it might be important to sort of look locally, what are pay rates like in my geographical area? Are we below the rate? But also you might want to say, well, you know, why should people in London get paid so much more? Or if you are in London, you might want to make an argument that you ought to be paid more because living in London is very expensive. So you can kind of really like flex these points for your context, really, in ways that all make sense.
Thanks for that. And I think it just emphasizes what we were saying earlier, that information is power. The more information you've got, the better informed you obviously are, and the more sort of detail and argument you can put into a claim. Okay, can we talk a little bit about the different types of pay rises we can ask for? So we focused a lot so far on a raw percentage, right? On the same percentage across for the whole kind of employee body. What are some of the other types we can see where maybe different roles get different percentages? I think there's a particular name for that, isn't there? And I can't remember. But maybe what are some of the other ways we can look at how pay might go up?
Sure. So the LRD, we publish sort of two different sort of headline statistics. When we ask people about their pay deals, we sort of, these are the main things we draw on, which is one, what we call the lowest basic. So for the people who are on the lowest rate, sort of basic rate, what did they get? And then for people who are on, and then for sort of all grades, what was the increase? And that in itself could bring out some very interesting patterns. And usually we see the people on the lowest paid get a larger percentage. But recently the percentage for the lowest basic and the standard has been like quite similar. So which, you know, as somebody pointed out in the chat, you know, if you're getting the same percentage, then technically in absolute terms, the gap is getting larger between pay grades. So obviously, you know, your pay is determined, you know, we like to report data in terms of a percentage, but it might be negotiated quite differently. So for instance, it might be about like shift premiums, might account for some of the percentage increase, or it might be a sort of a percentage increase to salaries. But I think we want to be able to compare deals across those contexts. So I think that's why we sort of talk in terms of percentage often. But then, yeah, for instance, like if you're looking at a deal where there's been a flat increase to all grades, that implies a different percentage for different sections of the workforce, right? Because it will be, if you're on a lower wage, then that amount represents a bigger percentage increase for you. So yeah, and then in some industries also there's like quite specific ways that pay is calculated. So the EasyJet example I mentioned earlier. Oh, sorry, was it EasyJet? There was an airline recently where they basically, it wasn't a kind of straightforward pay rise, but there was a lot of pay that depended on was paid on a per flight basis. And they turned it into the kind of part of the basic pay. So that wouldn't necessarily mean that people are getting paid a lot more, but it could mean that they could be a lot more certain of their income because it was sort of less directly tied to the like per flight premium. So I think, yeah, kind of working out like on what basis is your pay sort of determined on is also quite important.
Thanks for that, Hazy. And remember as well, as reps, part of your role will be to talk to members to find out what they want. There's obviously different methods you can use for this, maybe dependent on the nature of your workplace, the size, that sort of thing. You might do a survey, which could be paper or electronic. You might be talking to them in small groups or a big member meeting. But as part of your role as a rep, you know, hopefully you're talking to members regularly anyway, and this is something that comes around maybe annually or every 3 years, depending on what your pay settlement agreement timeframe is. This is something you can do to get members' opinion. It's unlikely that everyone is always going to agree, but hopefully this can inform some of the arguments that you make as part of your pay claim. We've had quite a few questions as well about the differences between basic pay versus perhaps overtime or extra shift pay. Could you talk a little bit about what that means and how that may also affect a pay rise or a pay claim?
I don't want to repeat myself because I feel like I said a little bit about that already, but yeah, I mean, I think so. Definitely like, you want to make, I think some key principles maybe to bear in mind with that is if you're bargaining over a percentage increase to basic pay, then you shouldn't be leaving behind the other rates, for instance, for overtime or for specific kinds of shift. You can't let those kind of like just fall behind the basic rate, because you want to kind of keep that premium for work that is sort of done under sort of worse conditions for you personally, right? So I think basically, if you have a pay situation that is structured in that way, where there's, you know, kind of different rates, then like that needs to be kind of, there needs to be like an approach that's maintaining the distinctions between those, because those exist for a reason. So I think that's probably the main thing I would say about that. Are you looking for like examples?
No, not necessarily particular examples of this, but I think you've clarified how it should be separated out they're treated as sort of separate elements, right, of the pay claim, not bundled in together.
It depends how you want to present it. You could just say we want the same percentage increase for all the elements of pay, or you could sort of argue perhaps that a certain element of pay is, like, you know, that night shifts have not been sufficiently reimbursed given, you know, whatever costs people are incurring to have to do that. And so you know, and you know, again, you might want to look at sort of specifically what is happening in your workplace. Is it kind of the case that when people are assigned to that shift, they like really don't want to do it? What would make it worthwhile for them? Because then, you know, you can kind of show the employer, like, there's a reason that you need to listen to us on this, which is that, like, people aren't going to want to do this. It's like, this is a worse shift, and we want that recognized. So yeah, basically, you might want a specific argument, but you don't want to let the other rates be falling behind.
Thanks for that. We've had a question more about the process of negotiations and how that plays out. Now, I appreciate that neither you nor I are expert negotiators, but we can talk about perhaps what we've seen in the research. The viewer asks if these pay deals have to go to a ballot of members, or are they agreed, or can they be agreed by reps on negotiations alone?
Yeah.
What have you seen in the deals that you've got information on?
We unfortunately don't have information on what votes have happened or not happened. We have data on the deal itself, but I think generally, right, it is like at least best practice to be going to your members and saying, is that what are we willing to accept that? And like, yeah, so that should be the practice, right? And I think one thing that's important is, like, when you're in negotiations, like, don't let them like rush you for an answer of like, we want you to agree to this right now. Like, when you need to go back to your members, you need to go back to your members, because you're there to represent them. So if you should be able to say, I need to take that back to my members. But also then there's the thing of, like, you know, if you're going to go back to your members, you don't want to bring them something that's like not worth their time to consider, basically, right? So I think, and that is a challenge for reps, right? Because you need to be confident that you have a good sense of what people like will respond to. So yeah, basically the sort of standard process is that you take it back to members, and then you can put a recommendation for, you know, having looked at it, I really think this is the best we can get, even though it's less than what we wanted, or no, I think that they're sort of playing for time, and this, we can do better than this, and so on. So think about what you're bringing to your members, and what your interpretation is, because your members are going to have to rely on you to an extent, to interpret the negotiations. But I think that the key thing is you're there to represent them, so you want to be taking it back. But yeah, I'm not a negotiator myself, but that's
even though, like, we're not expert negotiators, but I think that's a really great way to think about it. As reps, you are there to represent your members in the room, and any kind of final decision would need to be, I think in most cases, put to the membership on a ballot. We do sometimes see examples of the negotiators recommending acceptance or rejection of an offer. We do sometimes hear about that, so there can be that involved. But like Tazy said, it's about explaining maybe how the negotiations went, your interpretation of them to your members, to help them make up the decision, make up their minds and come to a decision about the offer. Yes, sometimes, as we say, some offers are, you know, they're never going to pass the ballot, because they're ridiculous in the first place. So maybe if it comes way short of what the members have said, you can. But I think on the safe side, if it's a serious offer, it really does need to go to ballot, because you've got strength from your membership, right? You've got you're not there to speak for yourself, you're there to speak for your members, and they've put their faith in you in that situation. So we've almost come to the end of an hour, and so we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. So Tacy, if we had to give our audience 2 or 3 sort of main takeaways from this of what they should do or what they could look for if they're going to be involved in pay negotiations in the next year, what would they be?
Sure. So I think basically the thing to know is that pay recovery is possible, and we have seen that over the past year. But we do have to keep up that fight if we want to see that pattern continue. And so what that means for you is, I think, start preparing to find out stuff about your industry, and reach out to people who you can continue to have these conversations with, so you can get that information when you need it. And in addition, sort of build your connections within your sector and within your union, so that you can be ready to get that support and start talking to your members about their expectations and about what they want, so that you're in a situation where you can confidently go into negotiations and say, I know what my members want, and this is what it costs, and I know you can pay. That's where you want to be, right? And you want that to be beating inflation. So that's the key takeaway, I think. And the support is very much there in the movement. So yeah, that's the key thing I would say.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that, as really headlines for us to take away and put into practice tomorrow, next week, or when we are going to be involved in pay negotiations. So this is actually the final webinar from the TUC for 2024. Do join us again in January, where we have a packed schedule of more webinars on workplace issues and about the role of union reps. We can't wait to see you again next year. Do look out for the link to the recording, which we'll send out later today or tomorrow, and for your digital credential. I want to thank you all today. If this is your first webinar, or if you have joined us many times before, you've been fantastic this year in sharing the experiences of your workplace, telling us what's going on, and really being engaged and asking great questions. So we'll see you after Christmas. Have a great festive break, and goodbye from us all for now.